I always tell people it's such a cool thing to be a part of, actually how America runs and how we feed, clothe, and manufacture everything, right? So to know how all of that works and to be really a small part of it is amazing to us. And so we will always have an industrial division.
Jackie Koster is the CEO of Key Staffing, Inc., result-driven and passionate about connecting talented professionals with career opportunities. Jackie Koster is the CEO of Key Staffing, Inc., and also LLS Visionary of the Year. With over 15 years of work experience and specialization in the industrial, agricultural, and professional sectors, she was successfully built and led an esteemed staffing and recruiting firm here in Bakersfield, California, with a focus on temp to hire and direct hire placement. Through her strategic approach, industrial expertise, and commitment to client satisfaction, she has empowered countless businesses to help them employ talent locally. In today's episode, you're going to hear Jackie discuss how she started Key Staffing, where it currently is, and some trends she's seeing in the employment industry. You're also going to hear her talk about her up-and-coming casino night, May 3rd, which all proceeds are going to LLS, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society.
Welcome back to the Our 2 Cents podcast, the show where your local professionals sit down with an array of guests to hear their story and impart some wisdom for both business and life-improving skills. This is your place to hear business and community leaders discuss relevant topics that matter to you.
Well, hello, listeners. Thank you for tuning in this week. I have a special guest, Jackie Koster, CEO of Key Staffing, and also this year's LLS Visionary of the Year. So I'm super excited to have her here in the podcast room, and we can get to know her business and her mission with LLS. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Of course. So tell me a little bit. So, reading over your bio, you have 15 years experience in the HR and staffing industry, but, talk to me a little bit about how you started Key Staffing and like the process and why you wanted to go like out on your own.
Yeah. So I started Key Staffing in 2019, end of 2019. So a little bit right before the pandemic. I was at a large global firm before that, but I think I've always kind of been an entrepreneur at heart and always thought that how cool would it be to kind of have my own thing? And I come from a family that's very driven and my dad's an entrepreneur as well. And so I worked at Volt for a little bit and moved up in the ranks there. And then I just thought, why not go out on my own? A few changes within the organization. So I thought it was the perfect time to kind of jump and do my own thing. So October of 2019, decided to kind of go for it.
COVID hit.
Yes. And I was like, cool, we're going to take off. Like, we got this thing going. March 2020 hits and it's like,
COVID, yeah.
How about not? And I was like, okay. So just navigating through that.
So that's a huge change because you went from kind of this larger corporate, career path with stable salary income to being self-employed to quickly 3-4 months into being self-employed, shot down into we're closed.
Right.
So how did you manage that transition?
We just did what we thought we needed to do and just continued to grind. We still made calls. We couldn't go out those few weeks of March. Nobody was in the office, so there's really no point. But we're still making calls, still sending emails, still doing research, and we just literally pushed through. Like, that's nothing more to say other than the fact that we were like, we have to make this work.
Did you target different clients? So for example, there was essential workers and essential companies that had to work during COVID. So did you pivot and kind of go towards more of those clients to help with staffing?
Yes and no. Surprisingly, I would say May, June, we actually got a call from more of a non-essential client. I think everything obviously had started to open back up, but
outdoor stuff started to open up.
Yeah. And so we actually got a call from them, and that was kind of like our big break.
Okay.
And so it was a few months that we just had to manage the very little overhead that we had. We didn't have an office. We didn't have extras. We didn't have vehicles. We didn't have anything. And so we had 2 people to pay. So we had very, very little overhead. So it didn't take as much to get through COVID as it did probably a lot of other organizations that had to lay off or had to figure out the remote work. And so we weren't large, but we were able to kind of get through it. And then in June, once that hit, it kind of just took off from there.
That's awesome.
Yes, it was I would say for most a very stressful time. For us, maybe more a relaxing time because we didn't have the overhead. We knew the amount that we had to continue to bring in to make sure we got through those few months. Yeah. Right. Because
what about you personally? Because you went from having a salary job to then not having anything. So was that a personal adjustment, or is it something that, like, I know when I started Atlas, I left the corporate world and then came to Atlas knowing that I wasn't going to have a salary or pay for a while. And so I like stacked up my savings account to kind of pay for those things. Yep. Is that like a similar situation? You're like, okay, I have this. Yep. So yeah. So then COVID didn't hit too much for you because you're like, I already was planning on this anyways.
Yeah. So. We had about 6 months worth. So I knew, like, if you don't make it in 6 months, like, you're out of money. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, we got to figure it out. We have to do it. Right. But I think it makes for a cool story of like, hey, I had no choice but to grind for 6 months. Exactly. And then they tell me, you know, a month and a half, 2 months out of that, I can't go anywhere and I can't do anything. Okay. Kind of like I'm going to make this work because I want to prove that it can work.
Right. So at the time, I know we're focusing a little bit on COVID here, but because staffing now, obviously, when you're looking for somebody, it's like, hey, in person, and the job is in person, the roles are in person. During COVID, when you're trying to place people, was it different because you also had to be like, hey, this person might not be in person and it's online, and kind of navigating the expectations of the client and the employee on the new roles that COVID kind of had? Or did you not have any clients that really were doing any of the remote online stuff?
We didn't really have any. So we started heavy industrial because that's what I knew. And so obviously you can't do that from home, right? Like you can't pack their product from your living room. So we didn't have a choice, right? We had to send people out to work, but it was definitely a different experience for sure. Obviously I had never experienced anything like that. Never thought in my lifetime I would even experience a pandemic, right? Let alone own a business during a pandemic, or I should say start a business during the pandemic. But yeah, we didn't do as much remote, and we're not seeing it much now either. And of course there's thousands of remote jobs open, but none that we really staff.
So you mentioned industrial, and so I'm assuming you have some type of background in it, and that's why you specialized it. On your website, you say you also specialize industrial, office, administration, and professional. Do you want to go into a little bit more about each specialties and, like, you know, why you chose those ones to specialize in? Yeah, so my heart and soul is industrial. That's where I started in the staffing industry. So when I started in the staffing industry, I actually managed a very large, what we call an on-site program, and it was out at the Lebec area. So I managed anywhere from 200 to 300 temps out there, and I loved it. Industrial is, I always tell people, it's such a cool thing to be a part of, actually how America runs and how we feed, clothe, and manufacture everything, right? So to know how all that works and to be really a small part of it is amazing to us. Mm-hmm. And so we will always have an industrial division. In the same sense, we chose office, admin, professional, direct hire, also because, quite frankly, the margins are much higher. Mm-hmm. And so in order to offset cost of industrial, right, to make sure we had truly a decent cash flow, we had to bring in and start the office admin accounting. Right. And I did that at my old firm as well. We did clerical, we did direct hire, we did all of those things. So it's not that we didn't have the experience doing it. I think we just wanted to come in initially and say, this is our focus. Let's get really good at this. And then let's open up the different divisions. And that's what we did. And so, however, we've been doing office admin, clerical, direct hire for 3 of the almost 5 years. That's awesome. So what does the whole process look like, start from finish? So let's say that I came to you, like what would I expect if I came to you so that our listeners understand start to finish the process that you guys offer them? As far as candidate or client? So let's go over both. So let's start with, if I'm looking for a job and I'm wanting to connect with you, what does that process look like and what can I expect? Yeah, so we have different avenues that they can apply. We use ZipRecruiter, Indeed. We also partner with like local employment centers. So America's Job Center, we're really close with them, JobFest. And then we have our website, or you can walk in, can refer a friend, right? So there's a lot of different ways that somebody could apply, but essentially you would apply. We would obviously do an interview, and then from there, assess your skills and your wants and needs, right, to determine which positions we have that would be a good fit for you. Mm-hmm.
keeping in mind that we might not have something right away that's like the best fit. So one thing that we really dive into as well is what's your obligations outside of work, right? Do you have children you have to pick up? Do you have upcoming things that you need time off for, right? What do you have outside that potentially is going to hinder your ability to get to work? So do you need Monday through Thursday schedule? Do you need a weekend schedule, right? So really, really diving into that is important, because we also don't want to place somebody in a position where maybe it doesn't work out because of a schedule or transportation issues or anything. So we don't want that to be an issue.
Right.
So we're going to look at all that: skills and reliability and your ability to make that schedule work.
And how are you evaluating the candidate's skills? So like, is there pre-tests that you guys are doing other than an interview, or like exactly how are you knowing that when you send it to an employer that candidate has those skills that they're listing on the resume?
Yeah. So obviously we'll go over their resume with them. We'll ask for certain references. We'll do background checks, employment checks. So we do verify that these things they've actually done it. But another thing we like to do is if we had somebody complete an assignment somewhere, we like to send them to another assignment as long as they've completed it successfully, because then we can also personally vouch for that experience.
Makes sense.
And so, yeah, those are just a few things that we do to verify.
Okay. So if you don't have something available, then that's usually a waiting process for you to get back to them. But let's say if you do have something available, what can that candidate look for? Like, let's say they've never gone through a staffing agency. Like, what can they look for? Because I've tried to hire from a staffing agency before, so I know that like it's not direct contact with that person. I'm only contacting the staffing agency. Right. So you want to talk about with a candidate side what they can expect when they start going on these interviews and things like that.
Yeah, so they'll always have contact with us, because essentially if you go the temp to hire route, we will be their direct employer. And so we want to set that precedent right away, because let's say we do place them out, God forbid, but if there's concerns or issues or anything, we want to be able to take that off of our client's plate, right? So if you were to come to me and say, hey, Jackie, I noticed so-and-so has been late the last 3 days. Okay, no problem, Amanda. Let us get on the phone with them. Let us coach them. And, we'll put that in their record. So we do it for multiple reasons, but that's really one of the main reasons, because at the end of the day, we are the liaison, right, between the candidate and the client. Mm-hmm. And we also carry risk, right, when it comes to employing people. So we want to set that precedent so we are always in the know as well. Because to your point, it can go to the wayside, right? Like we can have somebody out for months and months and months. If we have no contact with them, then our risk of losing them, right, or the risk of you guys losing them as well, it becomes really high.
Right.
And so we just want to set that precedence that, hey, we're the liaison, but we're here for both the client and the candidate, right? So if the candidate comes to us and is saying, hey, X, Y, and Z, well, it's also our job to go back to the client and say, hey, we got this feedback. Is there something we can do to work on to like make this better?
Right. Makes sense. Okay, so now let's go from the perspective of the employer. If someone's trying to do, direct hire or attempt to hire, like what process can they expect from your guys' firm?
Yeah, so fairly simple process. Let's say you called and said, hey, I need a receptionist. Okay, let me get some details, and we get the details. Here's what we typically charge for admin clerical. Is this something that works for you? If so, then we send over the agreement. You sign the agreement, and then we immediately start sending you candidates. It's a little bit longer, I wouldn't say longer process on the industrial side, but there's a little bit more digging that we have to do only from a workers' comp perspective. And so we just have to get our workers' comp rate to determine what their cost for them is going to be. So the rate for clerical, admin, accounting, finance is all the same. So it's easy for me to say, oh, cool, you just need a receptionist, like here's what your markup's going to be. Industrial is way different. So it may take 24 hours to get a rate back for us, for me to get you quoted, unless we already work with an industry that's similar to what you're doing.
Total sense.
Then we already know that cost. But yeah, industrial is a little bit more. And I say that because the risk is also a little bit higher, right? So the risk of injury, the risk of turnover, the risk of everything on industrial is way higher than professional.
Why don't you tell me something that was a challenge currently in your business, and then something that you felt like, you know what, I've really grown in this area, we're killing it, and you're super proud of like, where you're at. So like looking at this year, what's a challenge that you're seeing, for yourselves, and, what's a reward that you've already kind of been seeing? Yeah.
So I would say 2023 was our year of cleanup.
Okay.
If you will. 2023 was very challenging, from a culture to a margin to everything, right? To vendors. I mean, you name it. I was like, what is happening right now? But you kind of got to buckle down and just say, you're going to go through it. Here's your growing pains and you're going to come out on top. So 2023, we actually cut our staff in half. And so that was probably one of like the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. And I say that because we also cut our revenue in half. And that was by choice. And people look at me like, why would you do that? You're crazy. And this goes back to the industrial being a high risk. We had a client, not in Bakersfield, that essentially we couldn't work with anymore because the risk became way, way too high. And in this case, the reward did not outweigh the risk.
Right.
And so it just wasn't worth it anymore. Very large client of ours. And we just couldn't continue to staff. And so, however, hindsight, right? Looking at that, being able to say, that's okay, because we're going to cut back. We're going to revamp all of our processes, all of our SOPs, all of our policies, our handbooks, everything, right? Everything that we do to this point, we're going to revamp it. And so I would say my biggest challenge was getting through the point of everyone looking at me like I was insane. Like, why are you going to do this? And then now looking at everyone and saying, this is why. Right. And then being like, wow, we see it now, you know, because at that moment, all they're thinking is this is just money out of everyone's pockets.
Right.
And so they didn't understand like the big why. I think my biggest challenge last year was getting everyone to understand that I'm going to have to make decisions that maybe you don't completely agree with, but I need you to trust me in the fact that we're going to scale back, right, to a $7 million business and not an 11, but that's going to allow us to become a $20 million business, right? And then a 50, and then 100, and then, you know, and so that's probably been my biggest challenge to this point. The reward on the end of that is knowing that I've moved forward with the team that understands, right?
And supports you in your vision.
100%.
Yeah.
And every year we do a end of year meeting, right? And that end of year meeting was so different than any that we've had. And I say different in a good way, right? Like people were excited. People were like, this is amazing.
Right.
You know, like we're stoked for where we're going. And so on the end of that, to come out with the team that believes in us, believes in the company, believes in me, and says like, you know, we've got your back and we understand, like that's been the biggest reward.
That's awesome. And I think the key point of this, of you sharing, and thank you for sharing and being vulnerable here, is that, you know, sometimes in your business, you know, even myself included, I thought, yeah, scaling back is going to be a better result in the end. A lot of scaling back is just making sure you're all on the same level internally. And like you said, revamping policies and making sure that you have a system in place for the additional growth. I think what happens is when you're first starting a business, you take on clients and you grow. And sometimes the internal policies and things like that don't come along with it. And then because you're not having time to work in your business, you're working on your business, or you're working in your business, not on your business. Right. And so at some point you do have to step back as an entrepreneur and say, I do need to scale back for a second. I need to take the time to work on my business so that, you know, it can perform better. So I think that's a good takeaway for entrepreneurs that are listening, because it's not easy and people will look at you like, what do you mean? Why?
Yeah.
Like,
I always tell people, I feel like 2021 and 2022 was like such survival mode because we did grow very quickly.
Right.
And that's great, right? But at the end of the day, if the growth isn't manageable and sustainable, then you do, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, right? It's your obligation to make those hard decisions. And I had to sit back and, I mean, I had countless nights of, is this the right decision? Is this the right decision, right? Like, is this going to be detrimental, right? And I just had to say, I'm leaning more this way than I am this way. Yeah. And you know what? I may lose some people in the process, but if this is going to allow me to 10x my business 10 times because I was willing to take this cut, I would do it again.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned culture earlier. So now just pivoting a little bit to like the HR kind of, industry in a whole and staffing industry in a whole. What are some trends that we're seeing in 2024? I know we've been talking about culture since COVID because, pretty much the culture has changed all over with COVID, working half in the office, half not in the office, hybrid, all these different things. But also now staff wanting, well, I like to get off at a certain time from my kids and be home at a certain time, or wanting more, I'll take a decrease in pay because I'd rather have more vacation time, or I'd rather have options of being more flexible and just, how they come to work. So we were already, talking about those changes the last few years, and I'm sure they're going to continue to change. But what are you seeing in the staffing HR industry as like trends, or, what is happening in 2024 that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of generational differences. And so what was important to one generation is not important to the next, not important to the next, and not important to the next. So having to figure out how we can commingle those and bring those together, right, I think is the big challenge. I actually just went to a conference and he talked about generational and the differences. But you're not wrong, right? So
baby boomers are leaving, and they're the ones that were so like, we're doing this for our family, work hard, put your head down. 100%. We don't care about all these things. But now millennials and Gen Z are coming into the workforce, and they care about different things. They're a third of your workforce right
now, and so, and a third is a lot.
Right.
That's a lot, right? And so you are seeing thousands of baby boomers retire a day, right? Because either I'm sure they're tired.
Yeah.
But also to see how this new generation wants to work, right? And you look at how many, CEOs of baby boomers that are retiring, right? And then you're bringing in the younger generation who is changing everything.
Right.
But I think it's okay to incorporate both of them, right? I always say I feel like I'm in a good spot with where I'm at because I'm a millennial, but I also have the work ethic of a baby boomer.
Right.
And I don't even pretend to know the Gen Z lingo these days, but which also makes me feel old. But I think like millennials have a good a good sense of both, right? Because I'm a business owner, and guess what? I still want to go home to see my babies too.
Right.
And that doesn't change. And I do. I really do. And it's not every day. I work till probably 9:00 most nights.
Right.
But I take time off, and on Sundays, I do not work on Sundays.
Right.
But yeah, I think that is such a big challenge right now in the industry, and it doesn't matter what industry you work in, right? Just the total workforce. They're all different, right?
I agree. And I think that's been a hindrance for me, is because I feel like I worked with the baby boomer crowd when I've been working forever as a young age, and I'm an elder millennial as well. And I believe I have the work ethic of a baby boomer, but it's hard to motivate and relate to most all of my staff is Gen Z.
Yeah.
I don't know how to motivate them or to get them to, because in my mind, I'm like, because I learned the old fashioned ways, and then it's more discipline based, more write-ups, and that culture was kind of like that.
Yeah.
And so that was the fear of God into me, that I didn't want to mess up on my job, and, getting a write-up, all these things were scary to me. So I just performed and I did what I needed to do. And now you say, oh, we're doing write-ups, or we're doing, and like, they don't care. They don't care at all.
Yeah, they don't.
It's a completely whole different way. And I feel like I'm struggling with it because I am of that age where I worked with baby boomers enough to know their way. And then a millennial where I've worked with also other generations. But because I'm so successful in business, I feel like it was contributed to my teachings from the baby boomer.
The challenge is that they're okay leaving a job and having to find another one, right? Whereas you have those of us that are a little bit older that think that it's such an accomplishment to be with a company for decades, right? Which it is. Like, to me, that's amazing. To them, they're going to find the one that is going to give them most of what they're looking for. Right. And so it is that I want to work less and make the same or more. Right. And so, and again, I understand it. don't live that way. I understand why they want it. But I also understand that you don't get things without putting the work in. Right. And so I feel like I'm pulled in two different directions of like, I have a family and I want to be with them every second of every day. And then, I have a career and I want to be great and I want to be the best. And I know what that takes. But I think we have to figure out how to commingle all these. And to your point, right, of holding people accountable, my HR side is obviously saying like, you have to be consistent, right? So whether they like to be written up or they don't, you have to know that you might go through a few people till you find the one.
Right.
And that's just, I think, the reality that we live in right now. And I think also, though, you're finding more companies, and I want to make sure I say this the correct way. You're finding more companies that are willing to hire an older generation now, right? Because they're probably going to get more years out of that before retirement than they are a Gen Z.
Younger. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's determined. I spoke with one of my other HR friends, and they're like, well, you need to be using performance evaluation plans instead of like you're on probation or you're on a like just the terminology in the HR industry has turned to such more lightheartedness and then terminology instead of like so stern. And for me, I just feel like, well, I don't feel like this carries severity in it. Like, oh, you're on a performance evaluation plan instead of you're on probation. Like to me, because again, I grew up with the baby boomers, like, oh, I don't even want to be on probation. Like that's something I'm striving to not be. I just think it's so hard. And, I've even asked my staff, like, hey, what can we do to motivate you to, want to do better at your job, to grow at your job? A lot of it is vacation time, or they want early outs, or recently we implemented, which is the craziest thing, monthly gift cards. They want monthly gift cards to like restaurants or like local places as like a monthly incentive. And just little things like that I would have never really like thought about, or a day where it's more team bonding. Hey, can we go and do a bowling event? Or, just something, again, more about culture and more about their time off and things instead of, because for me, I was like, oh, bonus structure, more money is what motivates me. So I was like, oh, that's what I'm voting for, getting more money. And they're all like, no, like we'd rather have a day off, or rather have this. And I was just kind of shocked. But they were more excited about a $50 gift card or a day off than they were on like a bonus. So,
but even on those things, right? You can tell what they're longing for is connection, right? Is time, is, hey, let's go out and do those fun things, right? And it is crazy, but at the end of the day, on the days they are working, you may get more productivity out of them than the days that they are. Right. If you're able to provide these things for them, then you may see your productivity, double. Right. You don't know until you try
it. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a good step. I think asking them, right? Like, cause you don't know unless you ask. You can't assume that this is what somebody wants, because it's probably not what they want.
Yeah.
And just because it's what you want, it doesn't mean it's what they want.
Exactly.
And so, I think asking them, but it's not just asking them, it's what you do with that information that they give you is what's going to be important. So if you ask them and then you're just sitting on it, and not that you are, but if you just sit on it, it does nothing except take down your credibility as a leader, right? Because in their mind, they're going to be like, well, why'd you ask me that in the first place?
Yeah.
So I think doing something about the information that you have is even more important than just asking the information that you have.
Yeah. All right, we're going to pivot a little bit here. I did mention earlier that you are this year's LLS Visionary of the Year. So let's talk a little bit about LLS, their mission, what Visionary of the Year is, and, and the upcoming event you have here on May 3rd.
Yeah, so I was nominated as one of the nominees for Visionary of the Year. There's 12 or 13 of us. And basically what that means is we are to raise funds for Leukemia Lymphoma Society. And the funds that we raise go back to Kern County, which to me is amazing. I'm, born and raised Bakersfield, so this is my home. And one thing that we're trying to do as well is just bring awareness to the organization and how much it does actually affect Kern County.
Right.
I guess for me, until I got involved, you don't really know how many people are fighting their own battles, right? And,
Right.
To me, to understand and just bring, forefront that there's children in Kern County that are fighting this terrible battle, just got to me. And so that's basically what it is. We raise money for patient care, advocacy, awareness, research, trying to find a cure, right? So that's where the funds go. Mainly patient care. We have some people that we know. We have what's called our honored heroes. 2 little kids. One's Samantha, she's 11, and Matthew, he's 4. And one, first of all, that hit me so hard because I have a daughter who's 12, and I have a daughter who's 11, and I'm like, I could not even imagine going through something like this.
Right.
Like, how terrible for these moms and these families that this is the cards they've been dealt. And so, yeah, that's what we're doing. We have casino night on May 3rd. And so we're hoping to raise a bunch of funds there. It's going to be over off Allen and Jomani at a warehouse over there. But yeah, we're hoping to have just a ton of people. We're going to have dinner. We're going to have a poker tournament. We'll have some blackjack and roulette tables as well. So other people can play and gamble if they're not in the tournament. We'll have raffle prizes.
How does somebody, if they want to participate in this casino night to raise funds for, LOS, how would they get a hold of buying a ticket or getting involved?
Yeah, so I have a link I can send you, and it's also on my Instagram page, so I can send you that as well. But there's a link that you'll buy the tickets, and then at that time, if you want to do the poker tournament, you'll also buy in for the poker tournament there.
What's your Instagram handle so people can look it up?
It's Jackie __Koster. So Koster is my last name.
Perfect.
And then there's a link there for casino night and a link there for donations.
Awesome. And again, I've had, several people on the podcast in the past for, repeat listeners about LOS. That is something that, I support largely here in, Bakersfield. One of my dear friends, Seppi, and I, we have served on many committees for LOS. We were on the Red Warriors committee, not last year, but the year before. And so this is something that we've been involved in, I would say, the last 8 years or so, every year trying to do something for LOS. So this is something to me personally that is, important. And like you said, in a lot of other organizations, the funds might go on a national level and they don't stay local, but the local LOS here does keep all the funds here. So it will go to children here in Kern County that are suffering from cancer, and not just the children suffering, the families, if they need a place to stay while they're traveling back and forth from LA or other places. These funds are what, provide for those family and for the children. And helping for a cure. Some of them are curable and some of them we've had already cures and some of them working towards those cures. So this is something that's amazing. Everyone loves a casino night. So, whether you know a lot about LOS or not, just come out, have fun at casino night and just know you're giving to a really good cause that's staying here locally in Bakersfield. Yes,
all of the funds raised from casino night go towards LOS. So we're really excited about that. We will also have our honored heroes there at the casino night. And then we also have the annual gala for LLS on May 10th. So really excited about that. We also were selling tables for that, seats or tables for that as well. And any donation matters, right? If you have $25 to give, then you have $25 to give. So it all goes towards LLS and, like she said, back to Kern County. So any little bit counts.
Perfect. All right, we're going to close out with our favorite part of the segment, which is rapid fire questions to the other person here in the room, so you guys can get to know them a little bit better. So the first question is, what book are you currently reading and why?
Well, almost done. Think and Grow Rich.
Good one.
One, I read this because it's recommended by a ton of entrepreneurs, but two, I will probably read again because it's just such a mindset, desire, worth book. Like, gets you in that mindset. So I will probably read this every year, to be honest.
It's a really good book. I think, I've read it twice, and each time you get different things from it. And that's how it is with any book. Really, if you read at different stages of your life, you're going to get different things from it. So I think that is a book that you should continuously keep reading. Okay, our next question. If you could turn back time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to grow her network. Just get to know as many people as you can. I think that's one reason why I've been able to grow my business, is because I've really adopted your network is your net worth.
Right.
And so I would definitely go back and take every opportunity that comes your way, right? You're 18. Like, try it. Why not?
Talk to everybody, be friends with everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
Awesome. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
I want to be remembered for having a servant heart. I think I grew up that way. Mm-hmm. My dad is that way. My mom's that way. And yeah, I've been doing community service since I was probably 5 years old. I want my team to know that too. It's part of the reason why I accepted Visionary of the Year, right? Did I have time to put another thing on my plate and another thing this big on my plate? The answer is no. But could I turn it down? The answer is no.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think just having a servant heart.
I like that a lot. It's hard to find more people like that nowadays. A lot of people are just in it for themselves and not for the community and things. And so I like being connected and knowing other people who are just trying to give back and help as much. So, and I think that bleeds through. I mean, we've only met each other maybe since January is when I think I met you. And quickly I was like, oh, that's somebody I need to go. I think I went up to you. I was like, hey, do you want to have a lunch? We don't know each other, but I feel like I could be friends with you. So let's have lunch. And, now I see you monthly at Power Hub, and now we're on the podcast. So yeah, I think it's definitely, that's the energy you give off. So
thank you. That's like the best compliment I could have.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Any last words or anything you'd like to tell the listeners before we close out today?
No, I just, thank you for having me, and happy to be on here to talk about the business and MLS. So if you need staffing, let us know. If you need a job, let us know. And if you want to come to casino night, let us know.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much.
This show has been brought to you by the Law Office of Kyle Jones, Troy Burton with the Lynn Company, CPA John Duffield, Scott Hansen Real Estate Lender, broker and investor, Dave Plivlich, President and CEO of the Marcom Group and MarcomBranding.com, and Amanda DiGiacomo, President of Atlas Financial Solutions. You've been listening to the Our 2 Cents podcast. Check out the show notes for links and more information about the show. Also visit our website at our2centspodcast.com or catch us on Instagram at Our 2 Cents Podcasts. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share with others.